All right, welcome everybody to Select Talks. Thank you guys for joining us. We know it's been a long day for you guys, and some of you just came through from after work. So thank you for coming. For those of you who it's your first time here, Select Talks is basically a panel discussion which we host here, discussing different topics to do with DJing, nightlife, and occasionally music production. So the topic which we're going to be discussing today is how many of you guys have been to a music festival or show of hands? I think everybody here, yeah. So basically, everybody goes to these things and everybody experiences it as a guest, but nobody ever wonders what goes into planning these things, or who's in charge of this, or who came up with this concept, or how do we go about having one of these kind of things. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. So the topic of discussion is how to launch a nightlife event or festival. And joining me today are two absolutely talented and incredible gentlemen. To my left, we have the one, the only. Actually, let me give you a nice introduction. Let me give you a nice introduction. So, funny story is, I first got introduced to this man around 2014, which is, okay, bear with me here, which is when I just turned 18 years old, okay? So that was when you're allowed to go to like festivals and stuff in Abu Dhabi, which is where I was raised. So the festival is called Creamfields, and when everybody was like at the main stage, I think there was like a commercial DJ playing. I think it was like Afrojack or Hardwell or something like that. There was this sort of secondary stage. It was like a coliseum kind of thing, and there's this guy just standing behind the booth wearing like a headband kind of thing, and he was just like banging out. And it was just me and him in that area at the time, and there was like some people behind me, and I was just like staring at him like, wow, what is going on? This is beautiful. And I tell him the story every time I see him. So this guy's super talented. He was a resident DJ at NRJ Radio Lebanon. He played at some prominent, incredible events all out the world. Amsterdam Dance Event, Creamfields, Pasha, Circle Loco, Cocoon, just to name a few. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Ronin. Thank you for joining us, Ronin. And no. Actually, it's very, very similar. But no. And uh, to my right, I have a person who absolutely inspires me every day. I kind of got introduced to this man the same way, sort of, that I met Ronin, which is he hosts a series of parties, which is very, very well renowned for being like a big contribution to developing the house and techno scene in Abu Dhabi. I don't know if you guys have been to Abu Dhabi or are familiar. So he owns a series of parties and record label, which he co-founded, called Boogie Box. So I don't know if you guys are familiar or not. And he also has been DJing career spans over 20 years, I want to say. 20 years in the industry, playing alongside some of the biggest names in dance music: Sven Vath, Nicholas Jar, Ame, just to name a few. He's played in London, Berlin, Amsterdam. Ladies and gentlemen, Hassan Alwan. That was good, right? That was good. I feel like it was balanced. It was balanced, right? Okay, so now I'm going to give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves. Hassan, go ahead.
So, the lovely intro from EYJEY. I'm Hassan. I run Boogie Box. Boogie Box is a series of nightlife parties I've been running since 2010. Record label as well. I run Selecta, this DJ shop too. I've been involved in the music industry for over 20 years. Been DJing for over 20 years. Been doing it in Montreal. Used to work at a club there called Stereo. I was a promoter there, also resident at Stereo Bar. I lived in London, threw some parties there. I ran a digital label while I was in London. Moved back to UAE in 2010 when I started Boogie Box, which is still running. Actually, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary a few months ago. And now we're in our 11th season of continuing to try to throw kick-ass parties and run our label.
Absolutely beautiful. Ronin, on to you.
Hey guys, my name is Ronin. I've been DJing since 2006. I run my creative agency. It's called &Co. We do creative work and strategy for many industries, including music, entertainment, and events. I've been running parties since 2006 under Beirut in the Mix. We host and curate many brands like Somewhere, Picnic, Sundays, and Float, a yearly festival that has been running for 10 years now in Lebanon. I just moved to the UAE, and I've been working with nearly all promoters and bookers and clubs in the scene in Beirut and in the UAE to develop brands and to push actually their vision across many verticals like products, especially when developing brands like club nights and party brands and so on. So yeah, that's my thing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, man. Okay, so we're just gonna dive right into it. So, like I mentioned earlier, the first festival that I ever went to, I wasn't really a big fan of dance music per se, but it was just something that everybody was doing. So it was this festival called Creamfields. It was in Abu Dhabi. So it had like a bunch of headline acts from across all genres of dance music. There was, I think Adam Bear was playing that year, Hardwell. There was Deadmau5. There's just yeah, Marco Carola as well. There's a bunch of fantastic artists performing. So that was my first experience going to a festival. But I was very curious to know as to which was yours. So who wants to go first? Ronin?
In terms of festival experience, you mean? Yeah. I think for me, the first one was Dance Valley in Amsterdam. That was mainly the one that actually gave me the most highlights. What I remember the most is how they curated the lineups, they curated the different stages, they created those different experiences in this huge field of greens, and how every stage has its own identity, how the crowd were actually blending in and mixing with each other. So that was mainly the highlight of it. I can also name maybe other festivals like Sonar, like Time Warp, ADE, maybe a couple of field events in London as well. So yeah, that's it basically.
Beautiful, beautiful. Hassan?
Well, first club or first kind of event that kind of opened my mind to this passion of ours?
Let's call it sort of a festival because we're looking at, you know, variety of artists, big bookings,
Yeah.
big venue.
Well, I'll start with the first club. The first club that really opened my eyes to this passion of mine was Fabric in London in 2000 and 2001. I was 17 years old. I still remember I had my fake ID. It was from the University of San Antonio, which I've never been to San Antonio. Got in there and experienced the club like I've never experienced before. Sweaty box, 4 walls. It's pretty big. Amazing curation of music, really underground, really raw, very UK sound, drum and bass, garage. Tech house was big at the time. Festival, I think probably the first festival that I experienced that kind of, you know, was on the same tip was a festival called Global Gathering in Stratford upon Avon. About 30,000 people, same kind of deal as I guess Music Valley, I think it was called. Different arenas. Each arena had its vibe. They had one for the, you know, the housey house, one for the funky house, one for the tech house, one for minimal, one for the UK sound, and every kind of arena had its own identity, both in terms of aesthetics, decor, curation, and whatnot. And that's probably the one. Oh yeah, they had roller coasters as well in the festival. So.
That's incredible. I wish one day I could visit a festival like that myself. So, so speaking of festivals and stuff, so as these guys mentioned earlier, Hassan runs Boogie Box, which is a series of nightlife events, and Ronin runs Retrogroove, which is sort of similar, I want to say, right? Okay, so before you guys decided to develop these concepts or bring them to life, well, obviously we know you both come from a background which is heavy into music and all that, but why did you feel like you wanted to do something like this? What was your inspiration? What was your vision? So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Mine came out of necessity. I moved back to Abu Dhabi from London. I co-founded Boogie Box with my partner Shadi Magalla. He had just moved back from Switzerland. We came to Abu Dhabi, we were tired, we were bored, we had nothing to do, we had no outlets, we shipped all our records back from Europe. We went out in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, we didn't see anything that we liked, we didn't see anywhere we could express ourselves. We had a lot of friends who were like-minded from the same kind of subcultures. And to be honest, ours was very simply, hey, let's throw a party and get everybody together and just let's play some music. That was it. And that then kind of snowballed into something very completely different, which we further developed the idea and enhanced as we went along. But the main reason was we just wanted a place to play music.
Very beautiful. Ronin?
When I started, it was nearly around 2006. So also finding the need to play in a proper venue and being surrounded by the people that actually enjoy that music. So the way it started, it was in 2006, after the summer of the war in Beirut. The city was torn and people were feeling extremely down and extremely uninspired. So we thought that during our first year of university, that was the perfect time to actually bring people together and push them to experience something better or something more inspiring at that time. So it also came out of need of us wanting to share that with the people who like it. And funny enough, at that time when you used to put a Facebook event up, you get easy 1,000, 2,000 people attending. So everyone was there. It was the it thing to get an event out on Facebook. And also we weren't really reliant on that at the beginning, because we also went out of the main gate of uni, just print out a couple of 100, 200 flyers and go inside, go to the cafeteria and just throw them out. And the party would just fill with bookings of wanting tickets and so on a couple of hours after. So it was that at that time.
That's actually amazing. So it seems both of you were sort of on the similar sort of line of why you wanted to do this, but kind of. I mean, different eras, but I want to say the process was not too different. The intention was there, the vision was there. It all came out of the heart. You didn't do this because you wanted to sell out or because you wanted to make money off people, which, you know, some people that's the case for them. So a topic I wanted to touch on a little bit is you guys told us what you did and why you did it, but we want to know a little bit about what was necessary for you to kind of make this reality. Like, what steps or sort of baby things you had to do in the beginning just to get this off the ground. So Ronin told us a little bit that he printed out flyers, gave them out in the cafeteria, that kind of thing. Tell us a little bit more about what was the process behind creating the event, you know, from the smallest details such as the logo to the biggest things such as booking the artists, all that kind of thing. Tell us all that juicy stuff.
I was expecting that question, because I have a funny story for that. I used to spend hours and hours just on RA and on French electronic music magazines to get inspired on what our next party would be themed, or what would look like, or what we would call it, and so on. So I used to just copy paste a few JPEGs, throw them on Paint, just do a nice flyer, take some words from different party collective bios here and there, whatever I like, just bring them in together, and you know, this big mix of ideas and of colors would just funnel into our next party concept, our next party. And this is funny enough, this is how I actually did the first Beirut in the Mix logo. And then after, when we had a little bit more budget, we hired a designer to actually do the whole branding and so on and so forth. So I think what was most important back then is to actually have the right people around you. So we were only friends having fun. One person was handling the venue deal, the other was doing the promotion and the printout and the flyers, the other was getting alcohol deals, etc., etc. So this is how everything came up, and this is how we actually started doing this whole together.
So it's pretty much a team effort. It's not something you can do by yourself. Yeah, this is something we want to highlight on. So Hassan, tell us about your experience.
Well, funnily enough, our first flyer was on Paint as well, and it was the worst flyer ever. We still have a printout of it. It was so shit. We took a photo from Google and just put some text over it. It was really, really bad. But I agree with Ronin. Having people, or the right people around you who share the vision, share the passion and drive is so important. It's not easy to throw a party. It's definitely a team effort, and you cannot do it all yourself. So having the right people around you, the right community, the right thinking is so important. Yeah. But what are some of the important things? Obviously, you know, coming up with a concept. What is it that you stand for? What is it you're trying to achieve? What is your music policy? Getting the messaging out there. Back when we started, as he also touched on, Facebook hadn't really even started. I mean, Montreal, definitely not London either. But so it was all about printing flyers and getting on the street, getting in the right places and sharing it with the right people. So we did whatever we thought we needed to do to get the message out to people who we thought were relevant to us. Curating the right lineup to get the right, programming of DJs to perform who we thought fit the ethos of our sound, of what we were trying to be. And then most importantly, a kick-ass sound system, which we did not have when we first started. They were shitty JBL speakers, but we had to start somewhere. Yeah.
Something that I'd like to add too is back then when my mind at least was a white canvas, all the inspiration that we used to get was actually everything we would put out was a product of all the inspiration we used to get from the parties we went to, the sets we listened to, the stuff we've seen on TV or online, etc. So this is how all those inspiration forged who we are, and throughout the different parties we could better things, better the sound system, better the music policy, better the door policy, etc., etc.
No, absolutely. So you guys had some very similar points there to put out. But one thing that Hassan mentioned as well is, so obviously when you're planning a concept, for a party, like at the end of the day, you got to think, where are you going to have this party? You know what I mean? So, and obviously it differs all around the world. Some places you can just rock up. You can be like, hey, I have this kick-ass lineup of DJs. We're going to bring you people. You're going to make money. Let us do this here. But some places it's a little bit more tricky than that. So I feel like a question that a lot of people want answered, especially, the people who are just getting into the industry in this region, is how can you bring your concept or your proposal, let's call it that, to a venue? What steps do you go through to do that within this region?
So I've done this very same job, approaching venues in Montreal. I've done it in London. I've done it in Abu Dhabi. I've done it in Dubai. Honestly, you may think there are a lot of differences. It's all the same. What does a venue care about? First of all, if you haven't done a party before and you have no reputation, no brand, no proven success, no big venue or established venue is going to look at you. So what did we have to do? We had to go to venues that nobody knew about, venues that sucked, venues that had no people attending, venues that were struggling, who were willing to take a risk on somebody new just to bring in people into the venue. How would we approach it? I mean, it was really, when we first started, it was very basic. I don't even think when I first started we ever put a proposal together. It was more we'd approach the manager of a venue and say, hey, your Thursday, your Friday's pretty quiet. Do you want to give us a chance? We want to come in, we want to throw a party. We think we can bring 50, 100 people down. And, let's talk. Are you open to it? Finding that venue that's willing to take a chance on you, who is struggling, they're obviously more open to it. If you find that person who's willing to listen to you, then it's about you and the venue negotiating some sort of deal where whether it's ticket sales at the door, taking a percentage of food of bar revenue, and you come to an agreement and launch your first party. And hopefully, you grow from there.
For sure. Ronin?
Maybe as an extension of what Hassan said, if that's maybe in the early days of starting parties and so on, where if you don't have a track record of previous parties or as an artist, it would maybe be hard to actually go and lock a venue. But if eventually you get to do maybe 1, 2, or 3 venues, it's very important, in my opinion, to put everything on paper. So let's say if you are to go and pitch that to a venue or to another promoter for a potential collaboration or festival or so on, maybe have a couple of slides, a couple of words in of what your purpose is, of why you're doing that, what's your music policy like, maybe put some sort of pictures to show the mood board of the party, maybe some testimonials from people who came to the party and so on. So everything that would actually bring value to the person reading your proposal or seeing what you're up to, that would maybe increase your chances of getting the night into that venue. Also, another point is it always starts with something like, it's either you have an international artist and you want to go and find a venue for this, or you have a great venue and you want to bring in an international and have the concept created accordingly. So there's always a starting point, and from that starting point, try to branch out the whole idea of the event, the whole art direction, the whole approach, and so on.
Okay, awesome. So I hope that answered a few questions that you guys may have had. It's not really rocket science because, you know, in the end of the day, these people who are running these venues and these clubs, they're people just like us, and everybody has a job, and theirs is to kind of make money. So it's what I'm trying to say here is you shouldn't really take it to heart if, you know, you go to a venue and they tell you you've never played somewhere before, you don't have experience. How do I know that you're going to bring me heads into the club? Maybe I'm wasting a night on you. Maybe you take the booking and nobody comes, and then I'm losing money. So it's kind of political, unfortunately, but you can't let that stop you. You got to keep trying. You got to keep. I mean, nowadays it's a little bit different from how Hassan mentioned it was for him to Ronin as well, because nowadays we have like a little bit of a blessing that nobody's really taking advantage of, which is the internet. So everything, you can put up your SoundCloud, you can put up your Facebook, your mixes, your live sets, everything you've done. You can have that all on a piece of paper or an email or anything, and you can just have that and hand it over, and then you can see how it goes for you. Because back in the day, you had to have CDs, you had to have good reputation, you had to know people. I mean, you still do now, but it was just a whole different era. So it's a little bit easier now. So I think you guys should try to note that down and take advantage of it as much as you can.
What's critical now is technically the sea of opportunities and the sea of noise and the sea of options that you have. This is what's actually maybe more challenging today. Yeah.
Surely. So we heard about. So you guys just mentioned to us about how you can get your proposals done, but also that you guys have been doing this for quite some time now. You know, like we said, Boogie Box just completed its 10th anniversary. Ronin, you've run through a bunch of stuff such as Beirut in the Mix. You did Retrogroove as well. I'm sure you did a few other things, and they're still going. But when you guys first kicked these things off, what are some things that you felt like, you know, were giving you a hard time, or things that you were struggling with? Not necessarily it has to be from the venue, but maybe from your part, maybe things that you felt like you learned a little bit too late, or that you didn't think this was something you need to put into consideration. So tell us about a few of those things that you struggled with in the beginning.
That's a tough question. Was it going to be? I mean, there definitely a few things I've learned along the way. One, for me personally, because I DJ as well, and being a DJ myself, I know I take our booth. If you played at our party before, or if you've been to our party before, you'll know that we take our booths very seriously and our sound system very, very seriously. It helps that I own an AV company, which makes it very easier for me. But I've been to many, many parties where the dance floor will have a kick-ass sound system, and it sound beautiful, and the most amazing subwoofers and tops all over the place. But you get into the booth, and the DJ has a shitty-ass booth monitor. Maybe it's working, maybe it's not. Probably no subwoofers, all small tops, and it's cutting corners that really impact the DJ's experience, and impacting the DJ's experience and comfort levels impacts the whole party, because it's the DJ who's translating and converting that energy onto the dance floor. I'll be honest, I didn't pick that up until I owned an AV company, and I knew I could do that. Then I brought it in, and I probably played at a very big party somewhere, and I was like, fuck, okay, we need subs in the booth. We need to make the DJ comfortable. That's probably one thing, in hindsight, I would have done much sooner.
Ronin?
For me, maybe it would be wearing too many hats at the same time. I learned that the hard way, unfortunately. So running the party, DJing, promoting, trying to get people, locking the deal with the sound, keeping an eye on the floor, making sure that everyone's happy, exactly. It's dealing with problems, having fun at the same time. So all of that. I've learned that the hard way of actually delegating maybe, or being surrounded by the right people who can actually take some of that stress from you. So you end up maybe only DJing at that night or only running the party, but you can't do both or 3 or 4 things at the same time, unfortunately. But at the beginning, this is what you have to do. you have to push yourself a bit at the beginning, but if you have the right people with you, you spread out the tasks, and that would be fine. But now maybe that's a key learning that I would take on with me throughout the years to come.
Let me add something.
Sure.
I just remembered something.
Sure.
So we had a party a couple of days ago in Abu Dhabi, and I was actually sitting down with Ronan behind the booth talking about something. So Ronan runs a kick-ass marketing agency called Antco, who we use to manage our marketing at our Boogie Box parties, and at Selecta actually as well. And one of the things we were talking about, and maybe people don't want to hear this, but the importance of collecting data. And I've been throwing Boogie Box since 2010. We've probably had 120 to 150 parties since then. We didn't really started collecting data of people who would come to our parties, and I don't say it in a sinister way, collecting data so we can target and advert. No, it's collect data on people who are relevant to the party, who we want to inform about the party in the future. We didn't start doing it until, I don't even know when, like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And the amount of people that had come through our doors who had an amazing time, who now I have no contact with or no way of reaching, just because I didn't think about collecting data or knowing how to store that data. And that's something I think these guys do very, very well, and we were actually talking about at the party. So highly recommend you do that.
Awesome, guys. I hope everybody's noting these things down, because this is like golden information. You're not going to find this anywhere. You're getting it from the guys straight from the source. So thank you guys again for being here. So one more thing I want to add to the list is, out here in Dubai, there are quite a few festivals, right? Like, I don't know if we can call them like festivals, like events. Let's call them events, all right? So for instance, I mean, not targeting anyone, but I'm just gonna like name a few off the top of my head that I know. Recently, there was a couple. There's one called Oblivion. There was one called a very popular one out here. It's called Grooves on the Grass. There's also there's quite a few. So what I wanted to ask you guys is, based on the offering that we're seeing out here within the city, because this panel right here is limited to the people who live in Dubai. So what do you notice about these events, and what do you think they can be doing better? And what do you feel for the people who are attending? What advice can you give them to make their concept stand out or be better than the rest? So what do you guys think about that?
I think there was like 3 questions in that one, so I'm not sure which one to answer.
One by one. First, tell me what you think about what we have here, and then how can people stand out?
I mean, listen, the amount of parties in Dubai, not just festivals, parties in Dubai has grown exponentially. It's crazy. In the early 2000s, we really didn't have much happening here, hardly anything. The big clubs weren't doing house and techno. It wasn't commercial enough in the sense that it could bring in the punters, you could sell a lot of tables and whatnot. So it was a lot of independent promoters. There's definitely, in my opinion, a big divide between the independent promoter trying to do it themselves, trying to do something original, different, and the super mega clubs doing what they do best, which is book the top 50 DJs and sell tables. You've got to look at it from each perspective, because you're not going to compete with the Soho, with the White or whatever, and nor do I want to. So I guess it depends on how you look at it.
Sure. What's that? So what can people do to make their events or concept unique or stand out?
I mean, it's a lot of people are doing parties these days, and it's so easy to throw a party. You don't need that much money, to hire a couple local DJs or international DJ and a sound system and a space. It's really easy. Anybody can do it. You've got to be different. You've got to have a story to tell. What makes the party you? What is the message you're trying to communicate? I might piss off a lot of people, but these days there's a craze in a particular sound, which is a melodic techno sound, progressive house, which is fantastic, good for you. But I go on my Instagram these days and everything is that. And I think to myself, guys, come on, there's got to be more to it than that. Don't, in my opinion, there are trends. If you're trying to come in and do the same thing that's a trend, that's trendy, you're just going to be in this big group of trendy people throwing parties. Try to do something a little different, stand out, and it's going to be cheesy, but make it really about the music and the vibe, to stand out.
Golden advice right there. Ronan, what do you think?
There's something that Ralph, my partner from Retrogroove, says. You have three components to make a party successful. It's technically the music, the people, and the space. So once you have those three elements in, perfectly tuned together, this is where you actually have the perfect party or the great vibe or the perfect memory that you will actually last for the next days or months or years. So what Hassan said actually is a lot of this melodic scene is actually resembling each other. So I think what you mentioned at the beginning, those festivals that are coming in now, so let's say Groove on the Grass or Snoopyverse and so on, what I think, I just mentioned those two for a reason, because I believe they stood out in a very smart way. One is Snoopy and the way they were branding each of their events. So I think this is a very smart way to do it, even if the sound is the same compared to others in the scene. And Groove on the Grass, because of how massive their lineups are and how consistent they are in the production, in the way they do things, in the creativity and so on. I think those two stand out very, very well and very genuinely on that level. If you are a smaller party, maybe try to focus on a niche or on a group of people that would actually enjoy your vibe, enjoy your attitude, enjoy your music. If you're playing 140 BPM techno or just down tempo at 100, it doesn't matter. But as long as you're actually staying true to what you want and being patient, that's the most important thing, because you have to fail once, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times to learn from those mistakes, to learn from an empty dance floor and why we didn't bring people to the party, why the party was a failure, why DJ X shouldn't have been playing before DJ Y because the flow was somewhat a bit broken between this and that. So I think those are the mistakes that you actually learn from to be able to develop the perfect trilogy of music, people, and venue. You have to host a party in a shitty venue to know that you wouldn't host.
This doesn't work.
Exactly. Or you would attract a group of people that wouldn't fit in the party to understand that maybe you need to stick to your core, etc., etc. So that's the thinking and that's the patience that we should be having to actually be able to throw the, I'm not going to call it the perfect party, but at least the close to perfect party.
Just add something to that. On the subject of venues, you know, if you're a new promoter or doing it for the first time, you're not going to get the kick-ass venues, right? I remember the first party I ever did was in Montreal on a street called Crescent, which is like a tourist street, and it was at a place called, it's like a tacos place. They sold tacos, and then it was licensed. And we did it at their terrace, but we were new, and we wanted to take a risk and do something different. Just to say that just because a venue doesn't look good or whatever, when you take over a venue to throw a party, you should have flexibility and freedom, you know, with discussions with the management or whatnot, to try to turn that venue to make it look like something else. Lighting is so different. How does it look on the lights? How do you decorate it? How do you set it up? How do you lay it out? A venue may just look like a basic restaurant, but you can come in and treat it as a blank canvas to try to build something different, so that when somebody walks in with a combination of the light and aesthetics and decor and the AV and the layout and whatnot, you can make it look much better than it actually is.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Hassan. So before we jump into our Q&A session, I wanted to remind you guys that at the end of the day, we're all here. We have visions, we have ambitions, we have dreams. You know, we all sort of have the same goal. We have something we want to bring to life, you know, and you want something to be proud of. So I wanted to ask you guys on a little bit of a personal level. So what was a memory or sort of an experience you went to, maybe at a nightclub, maybe at a festival or at a concert, that made you feel, oh, this is something I want to do? And like then you go home, you're looking at yourself in the mirror, oh, I want things to look like this. How do I make it happen? So tell us about something that really stood out for you that sort of kept you going in the beginning.
I mean, for me, the earlier ones were the times I spent working in a stereo or partying in Fabric, and that's when I really knew. I was like, oh, I'd love to throw parties like that. I'd love to be able, as a DJ, to take people on journeys like that. I'd love to one day build a club or throw a party that was really raw and, you know, about the music and vibe. But that I think those were the first kind of instances. But I think there's a festival that stood out in terms of overall experience and aesthetics and sound and curation and programming and AV and whatnot. I think that was a festival I went to just outside of Amsterdam called Lente Cabinet, who, in my opinion, got everything right and, you know, inspired me. I think that might have even been a time in my life when I was considering stopping parties, and probably just inspired me to keep going and try to do things a little differently and change things up.
Fantastic. Ronan, what's your experience?
In the early days going to Paris when I was 17, 18, it's mainly the French house that got me into this. So people like Antoine Clamaran, people like Etienne de Crécy, Cassius, and so on. So they were like very, very, very inspiring for me in terms of music. Even Bob Sinclair before he got famous, and so that was maybe the time where I said to myself, maybe French house and house music was something that I would like to do, or I would like to actually spread, and so on. Even Global Underground, when John Digweed, Hernan Cataneo, and all those guys were quite big at that time, Danny Howells, Danny Tenaglia, and so that was mainly the time that got me inspired. In terms of highlights, the gig that actually was like the highlight of our journey, if you want, it was in 2010. We got invited to the Paris Techno Parade to host the Char d'Honneur there. So we were at the top of the chart. It was like nearly 500,000 people there. So that was like the big highlight of our DJ journey. Back then, I used to DJ with Nesta. We DJed together for 12 years as Ronan and Nesta. So that was one of the highlights. And this is also a way to. It was actually a party or a gathering that gave some sort of purpose to everything we were doing. Seeing 500,000 people in the streets of Paris on top of 25 trucks just dancing and moving around, that was extremely inspiring. And every time I go and visit festivals, whether it's Decmantel Selectors in Croatia or Sunwaves in Romania, Sonar in Barcelona, every time you get this new experience and this new energy in you that keeps you going and going and going. So I think that's why Hassan has been doing that for about 20 plus years, and we've all been doing that for quite some times, because it's people's energy that's channeled through you, and that you actually bring back into creativity, music, mixing, and so on. It was too inspiring.
All right, so that was extremely wholesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing that little memory with us. So before we head off into the Q&A session, do you guys have anything more you want to say? Any last minute tips or anything you want to add? Yeah? All right, so who's got any questions? Okay, don't be shy. Yeah. You want to take it? Yeah.
I mean, listen, so as part of Boogie Box, we get a lot of requests for people to play. A lot of the requests we get, which some appreciate, some I don't appreciate. I get random requests of people messaging me on Instagram, sending me music that's irrelevant to my party, irrelevant to our sound, who've never been to our party, who are just asking for gigs straight up. Okay, you can try. But if you really want to have a good chance of playing at somebody's party, you got to go there, meet them, see what the party's about, make sure you're on the same musical tip as them, and promote yourself to that crew, as long as that hopefully that you're aligned in the same music direction. When I first moved to Dubai, I had been DJing already for a while in London and Montreal, but to Abu Dhabi, but I'd come to Dubai because they have more parties. I'd been doing it for a while, but I didn't know anybody there. It was when I started going to the parties that I felt represented my sound and my musical direction. And at that time, it was Ill Communications. They used to throw a kick-ass party at Trilogy. And meeting them, and then meeting their crews, and then them learning about me, and then sharing music. And that led to me expanding my network and getting booked at their parties, which obviously we kind of aligned with musically. So I'd say find the right parties, the right promoters, mesh with them, go to their parties, support them, get to know them first, and then bring up that subject.
Rowan, you want to add something?
I guess what Hassan mentioned is a straightforward way to do this and the most common way to do it. When I totally agree. Maybe a more alternative guerrilla way to do this would which I actually used in 2006, which is mainly gather a few people around you, start maybe hosting some private gatherings in someone's space, try to attract maybe some like-minded people around. A group of 10 can become 20, a group of 20 can become 50, a group of 50 can become 100, and it's a party. So we created Beirut Mix out of the need of us wanting to play at a big venue. So this is how we came in. And I'm sure if I went to that first venue as a DJ saying, hey, I want to come and play, maybe they would have told me, no, that's not possible. But maybe coming in as a collective or a brand with a group of people, that would maybe increase your chances. I'm not saying that's the right way, but maybe it would increase your chances to actually get heard. Because at the end of the day, that venue would eventually want to fill and get people and monetize. So maybe that's also a way to do it. But you can try both and tell us if which one works.
I hope that answered your question, man. If anybody else has any more questions, please don't be shy. Yep.
Talking about like in, yeah. Are you talking about like in the type of music you're playing and kind of trying something a little different, which is not accepted? You mean?
I think what he's trying to say is, do you like it? Would it be better to fit into what's commercial or what's trending at the time?
No.
So, okay. No, definitely not, definitely not.
I know what you mean. It's a very tough question. It is a very tough question because it kind of happened to me when I moved here from London. When I moved here from London, I was in a phase of playing more of the UK techno, double techno, minimal stuff at the time. And I was still playing records, and I still do play records. And I moved to Abu Dhabi, and I started Boogie Box. And I felt that subconsciously, I felt that people would not be receptive to the sound. So I did, in fact, myself amend my sound for what I thought people in Abu Dhabi wanted, even if there was a Boogie Box party and it's a new Boogie Box party, and I would do more of the housey or tech housey stuff, not as dark and serious and whatnot, just because I thought they wouldn't get it. But I did realize, not too long after, that this was all an idea in my mind, and you won't know until you try. And the beauty about being a DJ is that you should be able to adjust on the fly and try things out. These days I play a lot of bassy techno stuff. I never in my life would have thought people in Abu Dhabi would get that. Bassy techno stuff or bassy stuff is very UK. Some parts of Germany, some parts of Europe, but it's very, very UK. I never thought anybody here would get it. So what I started doing is to throw it into my set and try it and see the reaction and base that on how much of it I would play, how far I can push it. You won't know until you try.
I think also the tricky part here is when you come in and play a set, if you have something already set in your head, okay, I'm gonna play that vibe, that party is that vibe, so this is my DJ bag is gonna just be full of that. So trying out new things, just like Hassan said, is maybe key to trying to see what the crowd thinks or reacts to that particular vibe. something else too is when you come in prepared, wanting to do your thing, but then the crowd gives you another kind of energy. And this is also maybe the job of a DJ to not impose his style, but to also take some feedback from the people, seeing them dancing, seeing them moving around, to actually adjust the set accordingly and push. But to maybe answer the second part of your question, finding a place for more alternative sound in the city, I think because artists that are too alternative reach out to venues or promoters that are not alternative enough. This is where there's no real match. But maybe if like-minded artists from the same style gather each other around one brand or umbrella and maybe try to push things with their entourage, it's maybe close to what I just answered now, would maybe be more beneficial or maybe more rewarding on an artist level and a party level.
Fantastic. I hope that answered your question. Do we have any others? Yeah? Sure.
That's a very cool question. There's a joke that we have, Ralph and I, technically, when about the melodic techno people. It's like converting the sinners, you know. So maybe when you go into a style like the commercial style of maybe Black Coffee or Solomon for a year or two or three, and eventually get fed up of that sound, you would want something more alternative, more interesting, more creative. So for me, I'm very happy and glad that a lot of people got into electronic music through artists like Taylor Voss and Black Coffee and Solomon and so on. And for me, it's a way into electronic music, and eventually after those years, they would mature maybe into a more proper sound, a more alternative sound, a more minimal sound, and so on. So experimenting different rooms in one space, I feel this is something extremely beneficial for the crowds to discover new things. If your festival or party identity is that, then yes, maybe why not? I'm sure with big festivals they have to bring in as many people as possible if you're not, you know, if they're commercial festivals. So yes, it would make sense. On the other hand, having DJs on the same lineup that play styles that are complementary but different is also something very interesting, I guess. So someone that would play industrial techno at 2, 3 a.m. versus someone that plays something a bit more mellow at the beginning, and then the build-up to that would be interesting. You would get the person that would listen to the more down-tempo stuff, experiment the techno aspect, and vice versa. So for me, this diversity is actually beneficial for the party and the party goer. Yeah.
Yep.
How did we get here?
Yeah.
$1 million. I mean, listen, there were always subgenres, honestly. It's when there was disco, then there was disco house. When there was house, then there was deep house. Then there was tribal house. There was tech house. There was progressive house. There will always be subgenres, and that's normal. But why did they call it melodic techno when it was not techno? Is that your question? Oh. Yeah, I think who comes up with these terms is the question. It's usually journalists, beatports, and whatnot for a way of marketing a specific genre. Is it the right terminology or not? Is up to debate. أكيد يعني. But I'm not sure if I answered your question. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's that? Yeah. I don't know. But you know, kind of different to that topic, it's actually nothing to do with your topic, but also super important is understanding where it actually all came from. Where did these subgenres of techno come from? Where did techno come from? Where did house come from? Where did disco come from? Like, how did we get to this evolution? I'm not trying to promote it, but we've got a big mural outside explaining the evolution of music and technology. But it's funny that I find it very scary, actually, and very sad that a lot of people today in the newer generation of DJs don't really understand where it came from. Don't understand that house music and techno music came from black music communities and gay music communities in the US, and that's where it came from. And that came from disco, and that came from funk and soul. Not knowing where we came from is not going to allow you to progress and take, you know, it's your job as the younger generation to take the music to the next level. You're not going to be able to get to the next level unless you understand where we came from. But I'm not pointing any fingers here. I'm just saying in general something that I've recently realized. Sorry?
You know, funny enough, Tale of Us gets inspired. It's now called melodic techno, but they get most of their inspiration from Italo disco. That's the funny part, you know, and recreating that Italo disco sound into a more mainstream approach, and people wanting to call techno as the next big thing, or like maybe a brand techno as the new style. It made things easier. Also, another example is when a producer goes into the studio and releases and produces something that maybe doesn't get categorized in one box. It gets maybe harder for him to break through, or it gets maybe harder for the website like Beatport to put his track into the top chart. That's why sometimes you see Italo disco tracks making it as top one on a techno chart, and maybe an indie track making it on top one. But it's actually labeled as melodic techno or as tech house. You know, those are also ways to actually break through the charts and not necessarily label the track as it is. So I think that would help.
I hope that answered your question. Do we have any more? Yeah. Very good question. Who wants to take it first?
The first international DJ we got was a Global Underground night with Jim Rivers. It was a producer. He was a very famous producer back then. The way we did it is actually just reached out to the agency that represents him. But before we maybe went out to the club and said, "Hey, we have that great idea of bringing a GU night to your club. Would you be up for it?" And they're like, "Yeah, let's talk about it later." And from that starting point, this is where we reached out to the agency that represents the artist. We booked a GU branded night because back then it was something big. We had a few options of artists that the agency suggested or recommended, and we picked Jim Rivers because that was the one initially that we wanted. So your question was mainly from a budget perspective or from a promotion perspective? I mean, from the money we gathered from the parties that we did back in university, like this was the money that we gathered to buy our first mixer, our first turntables, CDJs, and so on. And from that money, this is where we actually went into the venue with a small amount, because obviously you have to pay the agency fee and the 50% deposit, et cetera, to get the artist in with the visa, with the plane ticket, with the accommodation. with the extras, etc., etc. So that's how we got the funding, if you want. And for the promotion, just like any of our previous parties, we actually printed flyers, GU, Jim Rivers, with a big name on the flyer, and this is what actually got people in at the time. And from that, we build up to the next one and the next one and the next one.
Our first party, we didn't book our first international until the third season, maybe, to be very honest. But maybe our case was a little different. We focused on locals first. The first international we got was a producer called Inzek, and he just happened to be friends of a friend. He wasn't huge. He was a respected producer, but he wasn't huge. When we got him on a mate's rate, friends rate, whatnot. That gave us the first bit of credibility if we wanted to approach agents to book other DJs. And they asked, who did you book in the past? Enzek. He was like the only person. And we booked the second person. On the subject of budgets for DJs, I hate dealing with agents because if I want to book a DJ, I want the agent to say, not all agents obviously, but I want the agent to say this is his fee. But a lot of agents will tell you, make an offer, right? Yeah. I hate that because what they're doing is they're not interested in you because you don't have any experience, and they're telling you, make me an offer, and if it's crazy enough or tempting enough, I'll accept it. Or it could be as well that they have multiple offers for that date and they're gonna kind of auction it off. You base that offer on two things. One, if you book that DJ at 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 euros, whatever it is, and factor in the flight and everything, and you do your profit and loss, you expect to get 200 people by selling tickets at 100 dirhams, whatever it is, doesn't make sense for you. That's the first thing you got to do. Then the second thing you've got to do is, it's difficult to gauge as well, but if you have some knowledge of what other promoters have paid for other DJs, you kind of benchmark on that. If they paid $100,000 for black coffee the other day, and some unknown asks you for $100,000, don't offer $100,000. That's a bad example, but at least gives you a benchmark. The last thing is, here in Dubai and in UAE actually, DJ fees are highly inflated for international DJs. And they're highly inflated because they are used to being booked big bucks to come perform at the super mega clubs. So if your concept is to book one of those top 50 DJs as an independent promoter, you're not going to succeed. It's almost impossible. You cannot compete with the budgets of the Soho and White Guards, whatnot. So you need to be targeting some other group of artists that will make you stand out, make you different, and you're not going to have to pay an arm and a leg to book.
I think what you were trying to say is, if your USP for your party is to only book big headliners, you don't have a chance because other clubs. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Right. I hope that answered your question, man. Yeah, sure. Very good question.
For me personally, honestly, no. Maybe my party was different because in Abu Dhabi we were pretty much the only ones pushing it, and we were really the only outlet or one of two maximum doing the parties. So if I booked a Radio Slave or a Ryan Elliott or whatever to come perform on my party, I would at that time still get 500 people. If I booked locals, I would still get 500 people. But I would do it at the time because nobody would come perform in Abu Dhabi. They'd all do it in Dubai, and I wanted to give something to the Boogie Box people. But then I realized that it didn't matter who I booked because I'm still getting the same numbers. So then I started exploring different names. I booked, a Bodica, a more underground, obscure names to come perform. And for my people who had come to my party, they didn't care because they believed in our party, and they just come to it. In short, for my party, it didn't make a difference. However, nowadays I think, since we've elevated our game, grown so much, do I think booking an international would give us a bit more of a push? I think so today, but back then it didn't for us.
I think booking internationals, we learned it the hard way because we started doing that after the 5th or 6th party. We went into this rat race of, we need to book an international to the party so people can come, etc. It would affect the numbers just slightly because Lebanon was a bit of an unmatured scene back then. So every time the international would come, it would be like a big, massive event. Oh, an international DJ is coming. But then we learned after that if we want to build a proper, sustainable model for a party, we would only focus on the locals and mainly the residents. So residents 2-3 times, maybe one time you invite a guest and so on. And the regulars would actually trust you more, come more, and be more in symbiose with you. You know, just to you could invite an international once in a while, just maybe at your anniversary or maybe at a special event and so on. But this rat race of always getting international played against us. In Retrogroove, because we are an unannounced party, this is how it started. We didn't need to book international because the lineup was unannounced. So if we would want to get an international, it was an unannounced international, so a surprise for people coming in and finding out at the party. For the Ballroom Blitz, because it's a circuit of 3 rooms, we had to bring in internationals from different spectrums of the electronic music scene to bring in more value and more input. And because the landscape was competitive enough, and we had to fill the club of 1,000+ people every week. So we would alternate between residents playing all night or internationals and so on across the 2 seasons. Exactly, frequency, budget, and seasonality.
Cool. Anybody else? Let's start with you. That's it.
In my case, I wanted the record label to represent the sound of the party. Our parties were mostly, well, an extension of what we liked, which is a particular sound. It was hard when we first started the label. Our expectations were very different. We went straight on a vinyl, pressing 500 records each release, which was a bit crazy. But the alignment, when I first started, I had this, I insisted for the record label to be an extension of the party, in the sense that it's got to align, it's got to be the same message, the same communication, the same direction, which some people may agree with me. In hindsight, honestly, I've grown so much since then, and my palette of music is very wide. And evident of that is who I book for my parties. I'll book people who play more of the micro minimal stuff. I'll play people who play more of the housey disco stuff, techno stuff. It doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, need to be an extension. It could be a general feeling, a general vibe, a general direction, but it doesn't have to be so, what's the word I'm looking for, rigid. Musically, that is so, yeah.
Yep, I think in the back we had a question as well. Can you hear me? Yeah.
You can't really control who's coming through that door, but the first time and the second time, but the people who are coming in to show off and they wouldn't really find themselves on your dance floor would eventually not come the second time. So it's like maybe a natural selection across the different parties. And you would eventually end up, if you stay true to your music policy and to your vibe, you would end up with the right crowd after a couple of time running the party. And obviously some places or some clubs are labeled as show off versus you doing a party in a more underground place. Automatically the vibe of the communication, the vibe of the language, the vibe of the lineup would project that no, if you're here to show off, this place is not for you, and vice versa.
Yeah? Perfect. 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 All right. We got any more questions, guys? Okay, you know what? I have a question for you guys, actually. So when you guys first initially started your respective nights, I'm talking about the era for each of you, but like when you just had like your first 3 nights, your first 4 nights. So at what point did you feel like, okay, we get this now. We know how to run it. We reached a stage in time where we're comfortable doing this. Like, when did that happen for you? Where you were like, oh, we're doing another Retrogroove, or we're doing another Boogie Box. We're gonna do ABC. Like, when did you reach that point where you became comfortable? Is my question.
Personally, it took me a while. I mean, you know, we started in 2010. We were doing a party every month. I would say until probably you start off doing a party with a concept and idea, but that keeps morphing and morphing and evolving and evolving. And if it was the first time we do it, we're amateurs and you're learning as you go and trying to define the concept, define the vibe, the experience. Personally, for me, it took me some time. We kept doing parties. Thankfully, most of the parties were busy and kick-ass and fun and all that. But I got to the point where I thought, yes, this is it. This is the vibe. It took me a few years. It took me like, I think, 3-4 years maybe to say, yeah, now I get it. Now I understand the importance of all the elements, the attention to detail I've got to put in it. And this is how I want my parties to look and feel. It took me 3-4 years, I'd say.
Just so you guys can have like a ideal perspective that it's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that's going to happen in a week, in a year. Sometimes it takes a lot of commitment, but if you really want to make it happen, wait 3-4 years. But Ronan, what do you think about that?
I'm going to take the example of the Ballroom Blitz, where we opened the first night and we got 1,000+ people in. And then learning from the mistakes of the bar, of the door, of the sound system. After maybe the first season, this is where we started deciding to add more nights to the Friday. So
just for people who aren't familiar, how long is the season?
the season is approximately 5 to 6 months, opening every Friday, and during holidays we have one extra night a week. So after one season, we have decided, okay, that maybe it's time to open on a Saturday. People got the concept. We have a more steady flow of people coming in. Everyone got used to the vibe and so on. So maybe it's time to open on a Saturday. And then up to the end of the second season, before COVID hit, we decided to open a third night. So that was, if you want, the natural evolution in our case as Ballroom for a club. Yeah.
All right, thank you guys so much. Before we wrap it all up, do you have any last minute questions? Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I think honestly, Ronan touched on this before. You can't do everything yourself. So having clear roles in terms of who's doing what earlier on and giving each person a certain level of freedom to run with their role and do it. As long as you guys are on the same vision, same path, aligned, you should give each other the freedom to run with it and manage your own responsibilities. But yeah, obviously communicating as you go along and making key big decisions together, I get that. But clarification of roles, I think, is important in helping that.
A nice exercise that we're doing now, I told you that on last Saturday, is we're building an agency now that will actually host the Retrogroove events, the Somewhere events, the Sundays brands, and the Picnic brand. And what we're doing now is some sort of workshops every few days where we sit with the team and see the forte of each. So it's actually sitting with each, understanding what are the functions that need to be filled at the agency, CRM, communication, logistics, brand management, booking and artist management, and production and art direction. So if you lay everything down on a piece of paper and understand what functions you need to make a good party, and maybe clearly separate the roles of you and your partner, you would maybe end up with clearer responsibilities for each and clear expectations from one another. Because I think this is key for you guys to continue moving forward, and for you to continue for more than 2 or 3 years and to last for 10 and 15 years and plus. Yeah, that's basically it.
I hope that answered your question, man. Yeah? All right. Do we have any more before we wrap it up? Yeah. Sorry, couldn't see you.
the more the merrier, maybe. No, I mean you could be a one-man show, right? You could be a one-man show. You could the DJ run the party. Yeah, of course. But you could be a one-man show. But if if you want to run the best party or start running the best party, you should at least have 2 to 3 people around you. And again, doing this exercise of functions. What do I need to make a good party? I need good DJs. I need someone to handle the door. I need someone to do the deals with the venue, someone to communicate, and someone to bring the people in. This is just as top of mind, you know? So if you just think of that, you would maybe need five people or 3 people or 4 people. So there's no real number for that. But if you understand what function each has to play in the collective, this is where you can maybe start quantifying how many people you need. Because at the end, the outcome is what matters, not the number of people.
Just add to that. Yep. So when we first started, we were 2 people. It was Shadi and I, and we did everything. As time went, the team grew. People come to our parties. Hey, we love your party. We'd like to be a part of it. And we expanded, and we had a bigger marketing team and production setup team and whatnot. Abu Dhabi and Dubai being such a transient place, and COVID, most of my team, if not all my Boogie Box team, left. So the past few parties, I've been pretty much myself. But there's a smart way of doing it. The last couple of parties, you can outsource services, areas to people to help you do it. You cannot do it all yourself. In my case, when we did our 10-year anniversary, we brought in a project manager to say, hey man, I've got a DJ, I've got to deal with bookings, all that. I need you to be on the ground to make sure of everything else. I went to somebody like Ronin. I said, guys, I need your help managing all the marketing because there's no way I can do it. So although they're technically not part of Boogie Box, but they're Boogie Box partners, and you can do it in a smart, if you don't have that team in-house, you can find people who you can kind of onboard specifically for an event to assist you. Freelancers, companies, whatever it is.
A cool way to bring people in is recruit from within. So you will find your next project manager on your dance floor. You will find your next marketing person on your dance floor. You know, if they come to the party, they enjoy the vibe, they like the whole approach, they'll definitely do a great job at XYZ, you know.
Yeah, sir.
Short answer, yes. I think I would say for both of us.
Yeah, both combined, yes.
Yeah, you can definitely stick around after the panel and be happy to chat up with you. Any more questions? Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's a tough question because for me, the scene to export itself, you've got to have an identity, and that for me, the identity is either in a set of producers and DJs who come from there, who do something that's unique. That is the UAE sound, that's the Berlin sound, that's the whatever, the Romanian minimal sound. For me, that needs to happen first, where you have a strong community of producers and DJs who truly come up with a sound that is very unique to this region. But I think the sad thing is, again, because it being such a transient place, it's hard to do. Because people come in and out all the time. They come in for a job, 2-3 years and leave. Not to say it's impossible, but that's my 2 cents.
I think the Middle East electronic scene has been struggling with that on a broader sense, right? To export themselves as a Middle Eastern electronic music sound, because this white international big DJ supremacy has taken over mainly all cities. You know, like Beirut was like that for many years. Dubai started like that in the electronic scene. KSA now is taking that turn, but at the same time they're trying to nurture some sort of local talents there. So I think they're doing it. They learned from everyone's mistake and trying to do things the proper way. So I guess it's more of an identity problem when it comes to Middle Eastern electronic music than to try to export that over Europe or the US or Asia.
All right. Do we have any more? Yeah?
we spoke about putting out a good proposal, a solid proposal, to coming in either as a DJ or as a collective. So maybe clearly defining what your vision is, what your purpose is, why you're doing the party, what type of crowd you would be expecting at that venue. And something that we also mentioned previously is that venues at the end of the day, they want to make sure that they will get full on the day that you throw your party. So ensuring that to them in a way is maybe an easy or fast way in to host one or two parties, but the continuity of that would maybe be more challenging. So if I had to give one or two tips as top of mind, make sure that it's clear to the venue that you can fill the venue out, because that's mainly one of the most important things for them. And then number two, if your party vibe aligns with their space, but something that Hassan mentioned as well, even if you throw your party in a taco restaurant, it should look different than when someone comes in on a Monday or a Tuesday. So also try to maybe come in with a view that you're trying maybe to transform the place for one night, bring something unique and different on that particular night to maybe try to grab the attention of the venue manager to eventually get you the party or the deal.
By the way, I just remember it wasn't a taco restaurant, it was a tapas restaurant. It was, sorry. Was your question, just to add to what Ronan said, were you talking commercially? How would you to make a deal with a venue? Yeah. I mean, listen, they differ between cities, but generally how it works is if you do a party at a club or a bar, lounge, restaurant, whatever it is, you have the option, it's up to you if you want to charge tickets at the door or not. That's you as a promoter who makes that decision. Typically, if you make that decision, you will keep 100% of the revenue minus the taxes. And then off the bar, you take a percentage. And that percentage varies venue by venue. They have a lot of ladder scales, 0 to 10,000, you make 0%, 10 to 20,000, you make 10%, and so forth and so forth. Generally, in Abu Dhabi, they give a bit better rates, but in Dubai, if you're getting 20%, that's good. You should be happy. And then the more you make, the more the percentage grows. But again, the bit about the door ticket sales, that's up to you. My parties, I would refuse to charge ticket sales at the door unless I had an international DJ to justify selling those tickets so I can cover the cost of a flight or whatnot. But if I was doing locals, I would keep the door open and take a percentage from the bar.
And you also have the full rental options that maybe some venues could eventually offer. So you take the door, you take the bar, you handle everything from A to Z. That's also maybe an option. If the club is ready, of course, or the space is ready.
Anything else? Yep.
It's a very tough one, man. People are fickle. People get bored. It's normal for somebody wanting to go explore something else. I think if you've invested in this venue and your heart's in this venue and you want to stick with this venue because you've got some sort of investment or whatever it is, then the onus is on you to figure out creative ways to get them to come back. It can do with the aesthetics and the decor and the curation and the vibe and whatnot. I've worked in some clubs, in Canada, in England, throw parties where you'd go every month, the venue looks different. I mean, that's a bit excessive, but it gave people something to look forward to. Stereo in Montreal, I remember, they were it's a gay club, it's very flamboyant, and in the gay district, and it was all about that aesthetics and vibe, whatnot. So I would walk in one day to work, and it would completely different from another day. And they did that, and it was a way of retaining it, retaining people at the club, and keeping the club always original, and give their crowd always something to look forward to. That's my opinion.
Maybe I would just add bringing in maybe new promoters to the game that would bring in a fresher eye or a new crowd into the whole space, remodeling the space, maybe theming the nights in a way or another, or maybe using another floor. I don't know. How big is the building? 3 floors. Okay. Mm. You know, maybe a good example I would give is the Grand Factory in Beirut, where they have their winter venue for 5 months as the Grand Factory. Then they move for summer to Ame, which is a more outdoor space. So that would maybe break the whole continuity of having the same venue for 12 months. And then in between, they would host pop-up events, one in the mountains, one at the beach, one next to an industrial space, etc. So that would always bring in some novelty into the mix. So maybe that's something that you could eventually explore. So maybe have a winter and a summer venue, and maybe in between those dates, plug in some beach vibes, some mountain vibes. You have pretty interesting spaces in Jordan to explore. So I think that's also a good way to do it.
Has anything you want to add to that?
I think that was
Cool. Yeah. Do you play melodic techno?
I think we're picking on melodic techno too much. I'm feeling a bit sensitive. Listen, I think since COVID happened, actually what we saw is a lot of new DJs learn, how to DJ in COVID. A lot of people, promoters, getting ideas and saying, "Hey, fuck COVID, we want to try something. We want to breathe. We want to do something." We actually in Dubai so many new promoters come out and do some new concepts, and pretty successfully, frankly. I don't think it's too. It is crowded. There is a lot happening, but I think if anything, should be encouraging for you, because there's a lot of demand for it, and people are hungry to try different things. So I think the time is ripe, to be honest. Maybe not specifically now because Ramadan's coming up in summer, but the time is definitely right. I wouldn't let it discourage you.
Yep. Did I answer your question, man? Fantastic. Any more questions, guys? Anything? I think, yeah, sure.
For Ballroom as a club, we used a mix of social media eventually. We have developed our own publication that was out every 3 months that we would spread across many areas across the city. Hiring ambassadors that would relay our vision and our message to their communities. Those are mainly the 3 top channels that we use, so social media, publication, and ambassadors for the club, and that was pretty interesting in terms of results. For Retrogroove, because the party has a different way of doing things, we started with a closed group of like 50, 60 people, and we gave the opportunity to those people to add their friends to the list. So eventually, the 60 became 200, the 200 became 400, and 1,000, etc., etc. And now, every time you want to go to the party, we have to gather your data because we want to talk to you the next time and invite you the next time. And this is how organically throughout the last 3 years, we were able to gather that big database of people. So now we just send out emailers or WhatsApp messages, and we're able to drive traffic. So it's really how you want to see things. It's either you promote yourself as a party out there where you just put all your information out and scream. It's more like a push strategy. And the other one, it's more of a pull strategy where you wait for people to come in, to be a little bit more patient, and then it would pay off eventually.
Awesome, man. Hope that answered your question. Fantastic.
Or you can have a mix of both. So this is something that we're exploring now with our new brands, to have maybe one of the party components not disclosed, which is either the location or the lineup or the date. And you can have a mix of more a push strategy and a pull strategy that you can explore and see what are the strings that can actually pull the people in. Yeah. There's either a problem in the content that you're putting out, or the targeting, or the type of way you're setting up the ads. Because the only way to measure a conversion, whether it's ticket sales or SoundCloud set plays, this is the only way for you to measure conversion. Another way to do it is maybe to run the most reach ads possible on your Instagram page. And once you have a good 1,000 people, retarget those 1,000 people. Because when you just target a very wide array of audience, it's just like throwing a coin in a huge sea, you know? So the key to that is to retarget the audience that has either engaged with your content, or has shown interest, or messaged you, or visited your page in the past 60 or 120 days. And this is where, with the continuous content that you put out, eventually get better conversion rate, instead of throwing that money on a person that hasn't heard of you before, versus throwing it on a person that has engaged with your page, etc., etc.
Beautiful, man. Hope that helped you. Anything else, guys, before we wrap it up? Yeah, please.
No, you don't. You know, doesn't matter what visa you're on, tourist visa, resident visa, whatever it is. There's a rule in this country: if you perform at a venue, you need, it keeps changing, but you need a permit, as in the venue themselves will apply for an entertainer's license to say that so-and-so can DJ. And actually, the real reason that exists is because in the 70s and early 80s, there were a lot of belly dancers, and it was unregulated, and they used that law to get permits for belly dancers to perform at clubs. And if you read the full law, it says don't give money to the entertainer, don't give perfumes to the entertainer, don't give flowers to the entertainer. And that same law applies to DJs and musicians and artists and whatnot. But it doesn't matter what visa you're on. You submit your documents to the promoter, your resident visa or tourist visa, to the promoter, to the venue, and they will apply with, here it's DTCM, and Abu Dhabi it's DCT, which is the Culture and Tourism Authority, and they get your permit for you.
Perfect. Anything else, guys? Yeah, we're all good? All right, I guess we're going to wrap it up for today. One last thing I want to say is thank you guys so much for being here. We really appreciate it. If you guys are not already, please follow us on social media at Selected DJs. We run these events monthly. We have a lot of different things going on. Sometimes we do SELECTALKS, which is happening right now. Sometimes it's a panel. Sometimes it's a networking session where people come from different backgrounds, whether they're club bookers, promoters, DJs, artists, club owners sometimes. So it's just a space for everybody to feel a sense of community, because that's initially why Hassan started Selecta, because he wanted to create a sort of hub where like-minded people and DJs can come, get together, and sort of explore what opportunities everyone can present and grow together as a community. So definitely give us a follow on Selecta on all our social media channels if you haven't already. Push that notification button so you can always know when we have something going on. And yeah, thank you guys for coming.